When I pulled up to the store on Highway 75 between Sherman and Denison, Texas, it was raining that day. The rain was so heavy that visibility was down to a couple of feet, and even sitting in place, I couldn't see the store sign between my car in the parking lot and the entrance. When I landed in Dallas and Fort Worth, the sky was gray, but the car rental agent told me that I would probably encounter severe storms as I approached Lake Texoma in the north. I was on my way to one of our plants in Durant, Oklahoma, to supervise the installation of a new extruder in the shop floor, and I had to be there by the start of the next morning's shift. It wasn't that far from where I was. I had to leave at the last minute the night before, when one of the engineers working in Durant got sick and I was assigned the job. My wife also travels a lot for work, and this was one of those weeks. She was in Atlanta for a conference, and I had to finish work around the same time she was coming back. I walked up to the register with a bag of crisps and a soda, and a little schoolgirl rang up my total and handed me the receipt. "Are you heading north, sir?" I said yes. The state police just closed Highway 75 on the bridge heading north. Several tanker trucks were involved in a serious accident and have blocked the road. I think they're rerouting all traffic via the 82 to the 370-37, but there will be traffic jams for several miles. I thanked her for the information and walked to my car to decide what to do next. It was still raining cats and dogs. From where I was, I could get to Durant in 15 to 20 minutes on a dry road if the weather cleared up by morning. Given the conditions, that meant spending the night on the Texas side of the border. I launched the Honors Club app, booked a room at the Texoma Garden Inn, located less than a mile from where I was staying on one of the access roads, and headed there. "Mr. David Hoff?" the clerk asked, checking my reservation. I confirmed that it was me, and she handed me the key card for my room. It was a typical business hotel with a breakfast room and, very conveniently on this rainy day, a cozy grill bar where I could pass the time if I decided to stay the night. After making a quick call to the factory, I settled into my room. I have my own opinion about hotel rooms. I don't like them, even though I stay in them so often. I couldn't stay in the room for more than an hour. I tried to call my wife, Tracy, but couldn't get through, so I left her a message and said I would call her later in the evening. "What would you like to order for dinner?" asked the clerk when I asked where I could get a good dinner and a good beer. "I think you'll like Freewheels behind the hospital, across the highway from here." I followed his advice and drove there in the evening. It was crowded, so I agreed to sit at the bar, eat a hamburger, and drink a beer. When I finished eating and my next glass was brought to me, the band had just started playing. The next few minutes can be described as a pause in what I consider reality. The song Loose Wheels became background noise, and if you can imagine what horizontal vertigo feels like, that's the best I can describe my experience. I watched as she brought her glass of wine to her mouth and wiped a stain with a napkin. She was smiling. She was happy. She was definitely not in pain, and she was not alone. There was another couple with her and a man I had never seen before. I knew the other woman. They were very close, and it was obvious, at least to me, that all four of them knew each other well. This closeness didn't happen overnight. These two were pretty much how I imagined Tracy and myself, except I wasn't sitting at the table. I watched as my wife, with whom I had lived for 4 years, leaned over and kissed the man she was with, her lips lingering on his before they both stood up and walked out onto the dance floor. Sitting in my seat, I could watch their every move, every embrace, every touch on the cheek. I don't know how long I sat there watching them. Nothing around me mattered, and as if on autopilot, I took out my card and handed it to the waitress to pay the bill while the two lovers continued to dance. When the song ended, I signed the bill and watched them return to their table. He pulled out her chair before she sat down, and when he sat down and pointed to the table, she looked up. And it was perhaps the greatest coincidence in history. A bright flash of lightning struck the ground outside, and immediately there was a clap of thunder just as Tracy's eyes met mine. I don't know why I did it, but I slid off my chair and walked over to the table, and Tracy's eyes widened and she turned pale. By the time I reached the table, she was shaking, crying, and trying to say something I couldn't hear. "Hey, Tracy, don't get up for me. I'm leaving." I took off my wedding ring, looked at it, and held it up to my hand as if evaluating it. 24 carats of gold. It's probably worth more now than it was 4 years ago. Buy yourself something nice. I threw it on the table between 2 pairs of shoes, turned, and left. I remember thinking to myself, what a bloody coincidence. As I started the car and drove back to the hotel, she was standing at the entrance, watching me leave, her hand over her mouth. "I will never show you my broken heart. I have pride, and I know how to hide all my sadness and pain. I will cry in the rain. Tracy Gallant was a 29-year-old IT company employee when I first saw her in a cafe in downtown Charleston, South Carolina. She was having lunch at a table with several people, and I met her while waiting for the restroom, and see, a terribly awkward place to start a conversation, but we managed. She was the epitome of the American girl next door, with short hair and a dress that showed just a hint of cleavage but promised much more beneath. We've all heard stories about love at first sight, but that wasn't how it happened for me. I fell in love at second sight when she joined me at the bar after the party. I worked at a plastics factory in North Charleston and spent half my life on the road fixing things. And Tracy did pretty much the same thing in her line of work. She grew up in North Texas, and after graduating from the University of Austin and working in Dallas for several years, she decided to make a complete change and took a job as a troubleshooter at a company on Daniel Island in Charleston. I started my career at a plastic extrusion company and have stayed in the industry ever since, climbing the corporate ladder and becoming the go-to person when deadlines are tight. At just over 30, most guys consider me an early achiever. I, on the other hand, believe that I am simply consistent and see things through to the end. So Dave Hoff, is it you or me? I didn't need to be asked twice. She followed me to my flat on the peninsula, and I realized how beautiful my future wife was. I'm back in town next Friday. Let's do it again, my place this time. Only after a nice dinner and a few drinks. I'll pick you up at 7. From that moment on, the race to get married began. When our work schedules allowed, we became a couple. I must admit that for a while we were at arm's length because when I was in Scottsdale, Arizona for work, Tracy could be at home on Daniel Island. By the time I returned, she might have already flown to Houston. Two professional travelers didn't have to figure out how to communicate. We created a communication system. If we were flying through Atlanta, Cincinnati, Memphis, or any other place where our paths crossed, we would book a hotel room at the airport and continue our journey in the morning. It added a special spice to our romantic relationship. This went on for several months, and eventually we sat down and analyzed our business trips, locations, and frequency of overlap. We realized that 2/3 of our trips would be in the same region if we planned our schedules correctly, so that's what we did. It worked better than we thought. We were both on the road 50% of the time, and in most cases we could travel together. We have a factory in Arkansas, and Tracy has a client at a hospital in Memphis. We coordinated our trips so that I would fly to Memphis, rent a car, and drive to Pine Bluff. On the way back, I would meet her at the hotel where she was staying, and we would have dinner and then take care of business. We repeated this pattern in other places. Eventually, we managed to coordinate our trips so that on Thursday afternoon we were in New Orleans and spent the weekend there. During dinner at Commander's Palace, I proposed to Tracy by getting down on one knee in front of the whole restaurant, and she said yes. On Sunday afternoon, we were back on a plane flying back to Charleston. Charlie, this is Lynn, Tracy's cousin. Lynn, Charlie is an engineer from South Carolina, said Tracy's sister Lucy, turning to the woman sitting next to her. This was the third time Lucy had introduced me at a party as Charlie. Before we flew to Denton for the wedding, I didn't know anyone in Tracy's family except her parents. Lynn, I'm Dave, not Charlie, I said, glaring at Lucy. Tracy's two other sisters were friendly but reserved. In any case, I didn't let it spoil the day. Tracy and I focused our attention on each other, and fortunately, I got along well with her parents. I put my personal grievances aside, and later that evening, my fiancé rocked me in bed until 3 in the morning. The next day, we flew off to Jamaica for our honeymoon. The first few years of marriage were good, very good, and Tracy and I managed to synchronize our travel schedules with minimal interruptions. Then she got a promotion, and everything started to change. Her clients were transferred, and she began spending much more time in Minneapolis and Dallas. In fact, 2/3 of her travel was to those two cities. My company had nothing in the Minneapolis area, just a plant in Durant, Oklahoma. Dave, it's not for long, just a couple of years, and then I'll leave, and maybe then we can have a baby like we talked about. It was a good incentive, as we had been talking about starting a family for several months. Seriously, Dave, I know that when my boss retires, our departments will be merged, and then I might only have to travel once a month or a couple of times a quarter. The fact that we both travel a lot has many drawbacks, one of which is missing the pleasures of family life, and the temptations that arise on the road are frequent. Since we got married, I haven't looked at anyone but Tracy, but sometimes it wasn't my eyes that wandered, but my thoughts. Dave, this is Susan DeLong. Susan. She'll be your travel partner until you get settled and find your feet. My boss Monroe told me this one morning in his office with a smirk on his face. Susan was a new employee at one of our competitors. She was in her early 30s, a natural blonde with a gorgeous body, a stunning smile, and a great personality. Her husband worked abroad in Saudi Arabia, and she had made it clear to him that there was no way she was going to live in that socially backward country. Nevertheless, the opportunity to earn so much money was too tempting to turn down, so he flew home every 12 weeks and returned 4 weeks later. This arrangement was ideal for Susan, who worked at our company. We had met several times before we got stuck at the Doubletree Hotel in downtown Memphis. We were caught in an ice storm, which is rare in the South, and it shut down the airports from Memphis to Charlotte. Tracy was in Dallas and stayed for the weekend to visit one of her sisters, as she had to return there on Monday. After a light dinner, Susan and I had a couple of drinks at the bar and just chatted about everything under the sun. Despite her beauty, I really liked her. And to be honest, I thought her husband was damn stupid for leaving her alone for several months. In the morning, with nothing to do and our flight delayed until the next day, I became a real sophomore. We were joined by two other couples who were also stuck at the airport, and soon we were chatting like old friends. At some point, the conversation turned to drinking and the crazy things that had happened to each of us in our more adventurous youth. By this time, I had had a little more to drink than I should have, but the women started laughing at me, especially because I was drinking tequila. God knows I knew I shouldn't, I really did. I have a long history with tequila. They say tequila makes women take their clothes off. In my case, it's common sense and most of my memory. One of the women, Carol or something like that, ordered cocktails. Before I knew it, we were on the third round, and then I stopped counting. I remember the women playing musical chairs on our laps, and at one point Susan found herself firmly seated on a very grateful and growing accessory. I don't know where my hands were, but they weren't on the table. Sometime later, as the story goes, the six of us rode the lift to applause from the other patrons. Two couples ended up in the room across from mine, and Susan led the two of us to my room. To be honest, I don't remember what happened when the door closed. Everything else was erased from my memory until we woke up the next morning. She was smiling and I was confused. "Susan, what happened last night?" "It was the best night of my life, just you and me." "I ruined everything," I told her. "First of all, no matter how much a person drinks, I think they have the desire to do the wrong thing, even if all their inhibitions are gone. Of course, sometimes the ability to resist can be weak, but the actions that lead to that state are definitely voluntary. I know what happens when I drink too much tequila. There are no excuses for it, and now I've pushed my wife away, which is the last thing I wanted when I had my first drink." While I sat there thinking, Susan just sat there wrapped in a sheet. "Dave, if it's any consolation, what we did won't leave this room, I promise. Just so you know, it was the first time I'd done that since Billy started working for the Saudis. I haven't practiced, I swear, and like you, I'd like to keep it between us." Yeah, what happens in Memphis stays in Memphis, right? I couldn't help but smile in this situation. Susan gathered most of her clothes, got dressed, and went to her room to freshen up before we met for breakfast downstairs. Neither of us held a grudge against the other and promised it wouldn't happen again, although we both knew that what had happened was damn good. It was the only time I ever cheated on Tracy, and instead of opening a can of worms, I decided to keep it to myself. She wouldn't find out about it, it wouldn't happen again, and I would certainly do everything in my power to make up for it. I say for myself because I was the one who let her down, at least until she found out about it. Except for my one mistake, everything was the same at the Hoff's house. I was still traveling with Susan, and by the way, our friendship had grown stronger, not weaker, as one might have expected. Tracy, on the other hand, was away more often than she was at home, mostly in Dallas. Of course, this allowed her to see her family, but I was happy to see her more than a couple of times a week. Tracy looked great, really good. She had updated her wardrobe and made her outfits more feminine and less businesslike. I wasn't going to complain, of course, because my philosophy was, why spend all that time working out at the gym only to hide it under layers of clothing? Her sister Lucy came to stay with us for a week, while Tracy was working in her home office. This time she didn't call me Charlie, but there wasn't much to talk about. Both sisters were lost in their own thoughts, and almost every evening they went out together for a drink. One evening, the three of them came home, and I had to help Tracy get to bed. When I returned to the living room, Lucy was already lying on the sofa. "I don't know what Tracy sees in you, Davy, I really don't," she muttered, looking at me with half-closed eyes. "She could have had any number of good men back home, damn it, and she still can. Or maybe she still does." Lucy laughed with relief. Instead of getting angry, she decided it was damn funny and wandered off to the guest room. In any case, I went to bed, angry not only at Lucy but also at myself for still feeling guilty. I was glad Lucy was gone, but the next few months were even worse. Tracy was now away for 2 weeks at a time, preferring to spend her weekends in Dallas or Denton. She tried to make up for lost time when she was here, but there was something else I couldn't deal with. We had been married for 3.5 years, and I had never had any reason to doubt her commitment. Tracy's two other sisters, Claire and Torre, had become quite demonstrative towards me since our wedding, especially Torre. One evening, a couple of weeks before Tracy was due to leave for a week-long conference in Atlanta, she called me. "How's my brother-in-law doing?" "Twice as bad as your husband, Tori. Is he sitting there listening to you?" "Yes, he is." "Look, I don't want to meddle, but Jimmy and Claire and I are a little concerned about how much Tracy has been drinking lately." "Really? To be honest, I haven't noticed, but then again, my wife is away more than she's at home." "Yes, that too. She seems to have moved in with Lucy. Lucy has always been the wild one in the family, and Tracy has always looked up to her. Are you two getting along well? I know it's none of my business, but we're worried, and we love you very much." Tori brought up a subject that had been bothering me lately. Tracy drank 3, sometimes 4 glasses of wine with dinner and after. We were still affectionate with each other, but I had a strange feeling that she was trying harder than she needed to. Tori and I talked a little more before ending the conversation. I had a lot to think about. I knew how Tracy behaved when she drank. I felt the same fears for her that I felt for myself when I drank too much. But what worried me most was Lucy's influence. "Tracy, do you still stay with your parents when you're in Dallas?" "Yes, dear. Why do you ask?" "I thought that the next time you have a long business trip, I could go with you and see your parents. I haven't seen them since last Easter." I wasn't exactly lying. I would have gone for that reason, but I also wanted to see if Tracy would lie to me after what Tori had told me. It had been bothering me ever since she left for the conference. We talked the night before she left, and in the morning I drove her to the airport for her flight to Atlanta. "Dave, Will Jones got sick yesterday and had his appendix removed. That means they need someone experienced right away." Monroe just laughed. "You've been doing this for years. Give it a shot, lad." That meant a quick trip to Dallas-Fort Worth and a move to Oklahoma. Nothing out of the ordinary. By 7 o'clock that evening, I managed to get the last seat on a plane leaving the next morning at 9. And by the end of the day, I was in Durant, Oklahoma. Monroe called Susan and asked her to join me in Durant, although she was only able to book a ticket late in the evening. The flight was uneventful, except that we hit some turbulence as we entered the airspace over central and northern Texas. On the ground, I rented a car, and the concierge informed me that there were severe thunderstorms with large hail and several tornadoes east of the lower panhandle. If you have never been in a Texas rainstorm, you have not seen what rain can do. I sat under a couple of these downpours and watched a panoramic view of lightning and golf ball-sized hail falling all around me. I was sitting under an overpass, and the highway on both sides of me was covered with layers of huge hailstones, and a tornado tore apart a farmhouse and barn east of me. I headed north on Highway 75 towards Sherman and the bridge over the Red River, watching the ominous storm clouds along the way. As I approached Sherman from the south, the sky erupted. Everything on the highway came to a standstill and remained that way until I saw a quick-stop store on my right. It was a good thing I stopped because a couple of tanker trucks had collided on the North Bridge, and the metal carnage set everything on the river in motion. Fortunately, there were rooms available at the Sherman Garden Inn. After settling in, I called the factory to say I would arrive in the morning and sent the same message to Suzanne. The waitress placed a double patty burger, cooked medium, in front of me, one of the best I've ever had. I washed it down with a draft beer and ordered another glass. At that moment, everything fell into place. Everything that had previously made no sense to me, all the long trips, the overnight stays in Dallas, Denton, or elsewhere, now became clear. There is a difference between a one-night stand and a lasting relationship, at least in my view. Given my past, if Tracy had foolishly or ignorantly had some fun in a hotel room while I was away, I wouldn't have been offended. I could even have pretended I knew nothing and carried on as if nothing had happened. What I saw was not a one-time occurrence. It was an ongoing affair shared by a couple, not a crowd. Neither couple noticed the observer. The crowd was lively and noisy. The orchestra had just played a Texas duet. I watched the lovers with nausea in my stomach as they danced and shared their intimacy. The waitress returned my card, and as I signed the bill, the image of the lovers returning to their table reappeared in my treacherous mind. Was I angry? No, I was stuck in neutral with my foot on the gas pedal, and if I saw her tender gaze again, I might shift gears and the torque would send the whole place flying into pieces. Her eyes met mine, and at that moment the air was filled with the sound of thunder, and I silently walked over to the table. Hi, Tracy, don't get up for me. I'm leaving. I took it off my wedding ring, looked at it, and held it up to my hand as if evaluating it. 24 carats of gold. It's probably worth more now than it was 4 years ago. Buy yourself something nice. I looked into Tracy's sad eyes and felt my heart break. I glanced at her sister Lucy, but felt nothing. And without letting anyone say a word, I threw the ring on the table, turned, and headed for the door. She stood in the doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth, watching me drive away into the rain. Great job, guys, great job. The plant manager beamed with pride as we started up the new extruder line for the first time. Susan was on the final stage, and I was starting up the hopper and monitoring the screw. The first batch went through a set of molds to make water bottles for car advertising. After 3 days of work on the machine, everything went smoothly. Later that evening, Susan and I were having cocktails at the Choctaw Casino and Resort, a couple of miles from the factory. Well, are you ready to talk about it? She asked. Asked. No, I still don't know any more than I did on Tuesday night. I haven't talked to her yet. Damn it, she left me a dozen messages and I don't know how many text messages. I don't know what to say to her. That was the honest truth. All I knew was that my wife was clearly having an affair with some guy in her circle, and her damn sister was obviously involved, but that wasn't all I knew. Tracy was in love with him, whoever he was. I could see it in her face, and there was no denying it. Somehow, I buried it deep inside myself and pushed it out of my mind while I was working on the extruder, but now that it was all over, I was faced with my own reality and hell. I knew that at some point I would have to talk to her. Do you still love her? And if so, is that enough? God, what a question. It really was a question. I loved her and I didn't know. I looked at Susan and hugged her. She was a woman most men would die for, and her husband was leaving for 3 months. If he knew he was losing her, I think he would have quit his job and held her in his arms again. So why didn't I feel that way about Tracy? I knew the answer. She loved him. She loves him madly, Susan. It doesn't matter. She sat silently, a note of melancholy and sadness in her voice. Dave, do you think it's possible to love two people? I don't mean, can you tolerate a love affair with another man, but do you think a woman or a man can love two people at the same time? If so, can a woman make the right choice if her husband believes that love is enough for two people? I knew she was serious, but I had to laugh a little. A playful smile appeared on her face. I'm serious. You still love her, I know. And now you have to ask yourself if that's enough. And if so, will you fight for her? What if she finds out we were lovers, even if it was just that one night during the storm? Oh shit, I decided. What if she finds out I'm leaving my husband and ending up in your bed, and she leaves you because of what we did? Would you leave your husband for me? I asked, half serious. She was serious. Maybe, but Billy and I are almost split up. He signed a new 2-year contract even though I told him I was tired of being a wife 3 months a year. You know what he said? He said I should get myself a discreet lover on the side if I needed to. Damn, that tells me he's already doing it. So yes, I would file for divorce today if I knew I had a chance to sleep with you. She laughed with relief, but her eyes were wet. You need to talk to her and find out what's left between you. I don't mean a phone call. I mean, you need to sit down and talk it out. And with that, I finished my work for the day. I had an early flight back in the morning. She stood up, leaned over, kissed me quickly on the lips, and left me to ponder her situation. When Tracy was a little girl, Denton was still a relatively small town. Today, it is a sprawling suburb of Dallas and Fort Worth. Nevertheless, Steve and Donna Gallant still live there, and their 3 daughters live nearby. The 2 older daughters are married and have 2 children each. Lucy was the only one who lived in Dallas. Tracy was still a little girl. I climbed the tiled steps, and before I could knock, Donna opened the door and hugged me. Steve was already heading for the fridge to get a couple of cold beers. Dave, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. I really don't. Donna looked like she wanted to cry, but she held it back. Tori told us everything after she had to practically pull the teeth out of Lucy to get the truth out of her. I'm so ashamed I want to die. Donna, it's not your fault. We're all adults and we're all responsible for our own actions, not the actions of others, I said, trying to comfort her. Steve handed me a beer and we sat down at the kitchen table. Dave, Donna and I will be there for both of you, no matter what happens. Tracy is our daughter, and we'll do everything we can for her. And you need to know that you're our son too, and we'll do whatever you need. It's important to us that you know that. Guys, I haven't talked to Tracy yet. All I know is what I saw last night, and that's not enough for me. I'm flying home tonight, and I'll try to figure out what to do next. Here's what I know about this mess, Dave, Donna offered. Lucy has been playing matchmaker for Tracy since she just got out of college and was living with Lucy in Dallas. She almost hooked her up with a young guy from Denison. His name was Charlie Duguay, and they were engaged for a while until something happened and she left here for Charleston. And then she met you. For the last couple of years, Lucy had been seeing her brother Charlie on and off. And God, it's bad, according to Torre. Lucy talked Tracy into going out to dinner with them, and then Charlie showed up again, and, well, you know how it ended. I pretended everything was fine and the three of us had dinner. And later in the afternoon, Torre showed up with his two kids. I always imagined that one day Tracy and I would be in the same position. Dave, she really loves you. She just doesn't know how to look you in the eye after what she did. She didn't tell you about Charlie Duguay, did she? I shook my head. When I found out it was him, I wanted to beat up Lucy and Tracy, Lucy more. I love my sisters, but this really pisses me off. Torres, you don't need to get involved in this. When I get back, I'll see Tracy if she's still there and tell her everything. Maybe, but you should know that Tracy doesn't understand anything when it comes to Charlie. He's been a jerk since day one, but she thinks he's a saint. One night she caught him with his girlfriend Lucy after they supposedly got engaged, and the next day she flew to Charleston. He convinced her it was a one-time thing, but by then she had already met you, and that was the end of it. Mom said she told you the basic information I got from Lucy. God, I'm so angry with her. Apparently, the entire Gallant family is furious, and Tracy has left. At least that is what everyone believes. I played with the children for a while, then hugged and kissed them goodbye and headed to the airport to fly home. My plane arrived around 11 p.m. on Saturday, and when I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed that Tracy's car was there, but all the lights were off. I went into the house thinking she was asleep in her bedroom, but the bed was empty. The guest room was also empty, and there were 2 suitcases by the wardrobe. I threw my clothes in the washing machine, took a shower, put on some comfortable jeans and a sweater, and then left the house. I needed to relax. Living in the city center, we have a wide range of evening entertainment options within walking distance. The Market Square is only a few minutes' walk from my flat, and one of our favorite places to hang out is Henry's Restaurant. When I arrived, it was already past midnight and the night crowd was just starting to gather. "The usual, Slick?" asked Satch. He was the night bartender. He got his nickname because of his resemblance to his namesake. "Yes, and another one after that." He set 2 black Russians in front of me, and I just smiled. I wouldn't need a taxi. "Your mistress was here about an hour ago with some guy and another girl I've never seen before. Short blonde with a peacock tattoo on her shoulder?" "Yeah, man, that's her." I guessed it was Lucy. Tori had told me that she thought Lucy had probably flown out with Tracy so she wouldn't have to leave her alone with this problem. But it didn't matter. Lucy meant nothing to me, and I wasn't going to let her get in the way of Tracy and me talking. If she thought she was going to stay in my guest room with her boyfriend, she had the wrong idea. I sipped my drink, and soon the regulars drew me into their conversations, and by 2 o'clock in the morning, I was drunk enough to go home. Half a dozen of us were heading in the same direction. I live around the corner on Hazel Street, so I broke away from the group and turned towards my house. When I entered, the house was quiet. I suppose I should have expected that at that hour. The guest room door was closed, so I assumed it was occupied, but I was in a combative mood, so I opened it anyway. Both Lucy and Tracy were fast asleep. Closing the door, I headed for my bed and fell asleep quickly. Waking up around 6 in the morning, I took a couple of aspirin as usual and went to the kitchen to look for a jug of orange juice. Lucy was standing at the sink, and I think she was as surprised to see me as I was to see her. I went to the fridge, poured myself a glass of juice, drank it, standing there in all my glory, put the glass on the floor and looked straight at her. She was actually a very beautiful woman, probably the most beautiful girl in Gallant, but that didn't matter. "I want you to leave my house when I wake up." I turned around, went back to the bedroom, locked the door, and got into bed to sleep for a couple more hours. When I woke up for the second time around 10 a.m., both women were already gone, so after taking a shower and getting dressed, I went to the gym to work out. Burning calories and doing reps is one of those activities that stimulates my cognitive abilities. When the endorphins kick in, I can think clearly, and that allows me to plan my day or come up with a plan for whatever work I'm working on. No matter how much I worked, I always came to the same conclusion. Tracy really loved this guy. She had fallen in love with him for the first time in her life. At least, I thought she loved him now, and she was probably still in love with him when she met me. I boxed the punching bag a little longer and headed home. "Can we talk, Dave?" she asked, curled up in a chair by the window facing the street. She had obviously been crying, either because of him or because of me. But she was right. It was time to talk. "I'll take a shower, and we'll talk in the kitchen." 15 minutes later, we were sitting across from each other at the table with cups of coffee. "Your turn, Tracy." "Please take it." She slid my wedding ring across the table to me. I took it, looked at it, and put it in my pocket. She didn't say anything. "I'm so sorry this happened. I never wanted this," she began. "What are you apologizing for, Tracy?" She looked at me, not knowing what to say. "Why don't you start from the beginning and realize how bad it was?" I suggested. I didn't think she knew that her mother and Tori had shared important information with me, and I was curious to see how honest and open she would be if she started from the beginning. "Okay, that's better. His name is Charlie Duguay, and I've known him for about 8 years since I lived in Dallas. We were a couple until I broke up with him and moved to Charleston. I don't think he ever got over it. And when he found out I was in Dallas regularly, he arranged for us to meet one evening, and we had dinner together. Lucy and I went out for a drink, and Charlie showed up with his brother, whom Lucy was seeing at the time. Eventually, it became a regular thing when I was in town. When did you first do it with him after you got back together?" I realized she didn't want to answer that question. Besides, I had no proof that she had done it with him. I'd only caught them together at dinner in an intimate setting. "It was about 6 months ago." She got up, went into the bedroom, and came back with something in her hands. I had been thinking about it for 3 or 4 months, and one evening when Charlie and I were visiting Lucy, I heard her doing it. I hadn't planned it, but that evening I let myself do it. Maybe it was hormones, jealousy, or something else, but I did it. Then she threw what she was holding onto the table. It was a pair of women's panties. "I found them in your clothes after you came back from your trip to Memphis about a year ago, and I know for a fact they're not mine." I looked at them before I answered. "I wish you had told me then instead of now." We looked at each other, and she continued. "When I was in Dallas, Charlie and I were seeing each other until he moved to Denison for a new job a couple of months ago. I realized I had let the situation get out of hand, but then he convinced me to fly out to see him so we could spend some time together. I made up a trip to Atlanta and flew to Dallas. I stayed in Dallas with Lucy the first night, and the next day she, Charlie's brother Rob, and I drove to Denison. After you caught me there, I asked Lucy to drive me back to Dallas that same evening. I didn't sleep with Charlie on that trip, Dave. I knew I'd done something terrible." I saw tears in her eyes. "Are you still seeing her?" she asked, pointing to the clothes. "Just once, and looking back, I should have told you what happened, but I had no excuse." "What would you have said to me?" she asked. I told her the whole story, holding nothing back, and we both sat there feeling terrible about ourselves. "Tracy, do you love him?" "I don't know, Dave. Sometimes I think I do, and sometimes I don't know." I filled our cups with coffee and stood up, wondering what to do next. Susan was right. I needed to figure out if my love was enough and if I could survive a long-distance relationship with all its deception. I could blame my carelessness on the ice storm and the tequila, but that would be self-deception. In the end, we would be deceiving each other if we continued to make excuses. You need to figure out if you love the man you want to marry, and I need to figure out if I can survive a 6-month affair with a man who has won your heart at least once. I think we need to take a break." When I said that, she gasped, and tears began to flow, and I suddenly thought of something I hadn't thought of before. "Who was that man you and Lucy were with last night at Henry's?" At first, I thought her lips wouldn't move and she wouldn't say a word, but in the end, the tears and anger on her face forced her to speak. It was Charlie. You sent that bastard here with you?" I asked incredulously, my anger growing. "No, he followed us on Thursday when Lucy told him where we'd be." I don't know why, but I believed her. "Well, that's convenient for you. You can test your love for him here, but not in this house." I was furious, but I felt good. Tracy had to be in Minneapolis in a couple of days, so she booked a return ticket to Dallas and planned to stay with relatives, flying to work from Dallas instead of Charleston. Tori kept me informed, and through him I learned that Tracy and Lucy sometimes went out together. I considered hiring a private investigator to follow her on the weekends, but in the end, I didn't see the point. She needed to figure out for herself who and what was important in her life. I knew one thing. The longer she took to find herself, the easier it would be for me to let her go. I handed in my notice today, she said, sitting across from me at the table. It was unexpected. I didn't see the point in putting it off, and we both know it's inevitable. Considering what she had already told me, I suppose I agreed with her. How did he take it? I asked. Susan just shrugged and replied, I have no idea, and I'm not flying to Saudi Arabia to find out right now. How are you doing? She asked. It's been a month. She calls me every week, but I feel like she's calmed down for now. She's fallen back into a bad crowd, and to be honest, I'm almost ready to file for divorce myself. If that's her decision, I'll let her file. What about your decision, Dave? I've thought a lot about this and about what you said to me in Durante. I love her, and I think that's enough to make our marriage strong. But I can't compete with the ghost of another man if she still loves him. She has to choose me or him, not both. If I end up with all of her love, then everything will be fine. I can't do anything else. The breakup lasted a couple more months without any resolution. I knew she was still seeing that bastard, but I had invited her to meet him myself. What happened next didn't surprise me. Eventually, Tracy returned to Charleston, only to tell me that she was moving back to Dallas and wanted to part ways amicably. She believed she had never stopped loving him, and the cherry on top was that she couldn't forget the lavender underwear. Imagine that. I didn't know if I could survive a 6-month romance. As she stood at the door of my flat, it was raining, and I watched her get into the waiting taxi and drive away down Hazel Street. I stood on the steps and finally found the strength to cry in the rain. This is a great opportunity, lad. You'd better take it before some other big shot snatches her up. Monroe sat puffing on an unlit cigar. I need you to give me an answer in a couple of days. Is that okay with you? By the way, I'm sending an engineer from the company to the factory, a nice girl named Susan DeLong, or Koo. She's using her maiden name now. The old man was on the ball, and he knew it. Durant's factory needed a new vice president of manufacturing, and management, i.e. Monroe, had chosen me for the job. At 36, I would be the youngest vice president of manufacturing in the company, but it meant leaving Charleston and moving to the hills of southern Oklahoma. I didn't have to wait a couple of days. I'll take it. We shook hands, and 3 weeks later I was back on Highway 75 in North Texas, this time in bright sunshine. As I passed Sherman Denison on my way to Red River, I had a strange feeling in my head, but I didn't think much of it. There were no storm clouds on the horizon. The company executives were waiting for me, and I had already picked out the spot where I wanted to build my house, right on the shore of Lake Texoma, 15 minutes from the factory. Good afternoon, Mr. Hoff. The receptionist at the factory was a nice young woman named Rose, and she greeted me as I walked through the main entrance. We had met a year ago when we were installing the extruder. The human resources manager met me in the office, showed me to a corner office, and informed me that the entire management team was ready to meet with me when I was ready to start work. I waited until I had settled into my office, and the first thing I did was ask one of the operators I had befriended during my previous visits to give me a detailed tour of the entire plant. It was an astonishing sight. The place was messy. Several safety barriers were not working, and it seemed that 5S and other production optimization measures had been put on the back burner rather than being used to solve pressing problems. No wonder Monroe was smiling. That first day was a revelation not only for me, but for the entire management team. I set rules for everyone. The plant had to immediately clean up its safety program, and we had to start rebuilding the team first thing in the morning. That evening, I sat in the bar at the Choctaw Casino and Resort, sipping a pint of ale and watching the crowd of people in various states of consciousness, calculating how much more they were willing to lose in the many games of chance. I had never been a gambler myself except for my first marriage. It took 9 months of courtship to become a husband, and after 4 years of marriage, another 6 months to get out of it. The last 6 months after my maternity leave, I tried to cope with the feeling of loss as I watched her drive away in the pouring rain in downtown Charleston. My underwear against her poor judgment, and in the end, we were both losers and winners. Losers in the sense that we lost each other in an unnecessary battle, and winners in the sense that we each walked away unscathed. Tracy still owned her house on Daniel Island, which she kept as an investment property. I still had my flat on the peninsula. We both had separate savings and pensions, and no alimony. I still kept in touch with Steve and Donna in Denton, although our conversations became less frequent over time. I had hardly spoken to Tracy's sister Claire when I was still married, and the divorce did not change that. With Torre, it was different. We started talking more often, although I made it clear that I didn't need to know everything that was going on in Tracy's life. I would find out anyway. As for Lucy, there was no need to talk about her unless I was interested. Tracy and her soulmate moved in together after he returned to Dallas, and she refused to move to Sherman. A month ago, they flew to Las Vegas and came back married, much to Toria's relief. She wasn't going to go to the wedding even if she'd been invited. I guess that was the end of our epic story as a couple. It meant there was no going back, and there never had been. I think it was her marriage to this guy that allowed me to start a new life and get a job in Durant. I think Monroe understood that too. "Excuse me, Mr. Hoff, is this seat taken?" she asked, sinking into the chair without waiting for my answer. "Well, I was saving it for a savage." Susan just rolled her eyes. Her divorce had been finalized around the same time as mine, but it hadn't gone as smoothly as she had hoped. Her husband Billy resisted, tried to stage a loud argument over property, and at one point even demanded alimony. Susan's lawyer simply dismissed this by showing a copy of their tax returns, which showed that his income was higher than hers. He then changed tactics and accused her of marital infidelity, but without any evidence, and that didn't work either. The judge ruled that she had to sell the house and give him half the value, since she didn't want to live there. No one knows why he fought so hard. The poor man realized what he was losing, but he realized it too late, and it tormented him. He emailed her a photo of some prostitute. In response, she forwarded it to her friends with the caption, "Nice touch," and that was the last he heard from her. "Because of that crazy savage, you're going to be late for your morning meeting. I can drive you there on time and you'll be ready for a busy day." Without hesitation, we headed there. "I'm going to sleep here tonight instead of going back to my room," she whispered to me. Moments later, we were lying in bed, snuggled up together, watching the evening news and falling asleep in each other's arms. From then on, Susan started attending the morning staff meetings, although she reported to Monroe in Charleston. He probably planned it that way because he knew we were seeing each other from time to time, but for practical reasons, she worked for me. It was she who made the offer I needed to hear. "You need to fire about a third of your staff, Dave. They're not up to the task of turning this place around, and you know it." At that point, we had been at the plant in Durant for 2 weeks, and I was just getting to know most of the management team. Susan was right. The safety manager was going to get someone killed with his indifference. Reliability and capital planning were virtually non-existent. My manager didn't have a clue about manufacturing. In short, the company was a mess. A month later, half of my staff were new, and we were taking the first steps towards building a revitalized and enterprising team. The goal was not only to keep the plant running, but also to give me the opportunity to start a personal life away from the plant, namely, to lay the foundation for my new home. I flew to Charleston to finalize the sale of my apartment and bring Monroe up to speed, and stayed for the weekend. On Friday evening, when I walked in, Henry's was bustling, and Such was busy behind the bar. "Hey man, another Russian?" he shouted over the noise. I just nodded and handed him my business card. Then he looked at me with a sense of déjà vu. "Your ex? She left here about an hour ago with her new boyfriend, and that little blonde with the tattoo. They didn't pay their bar tab and said she'd be back, just so you know." He grinned like a Black Reaper. "To hell with her, him, and especially that other one." I wasn't about to get kicked out of my favorite place. "Buy me a drink and tell me how the deal went." Susan had flown in with me to work with Monroe on next year's budget, and today she had dressed up and perfected her look. No student at this establishment could top her. Of course, I was biased, but Such kept her cool too. Such told me that the idyllic modern woman was here with her new husband and sister and that they planned to return. Other than that, the closing went well. The money's in the bank, and until I build a house, I'm technically homeless. "Do you have a room you could spare for a homeless person?" "Only if you work, and speaking of work, here it is." She winked and nodded toward the door in the other end of the bar. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror and, as expected, all three had taken seats at the far end of the bar. I turned back to my companion and tried to ignore the mastodon in the room, but to no avail. Lucy rushed past on her way to the ladies' room. When she returned, she made her presence known. "Dave, I thought you'd tucked your tail between your legs and run away." "New victim," she said, trying to make the words sound sweet as they passed through her pouty lips, and glanced at Susan. "One of the fraternities is looking for a good bitch. It's steady work. You can get an invitation at the other end of the bar. See you, Lucy." I turned to Susan and ignored everything else she wanted to say, and she simply disappeared into the crowd. "Nice girl," Susan said, suppressing a smile that wanted to break through. A sorority bitch? At that moment, laughter rang out. Soon, several regulars joined us at the bar, wanting to know what was new in my life and congratulate me on my promotion. However, I was still thinking about the trio at the end of the bar. They were joined by Tracy's friends and they moved to a table hidden from prying eyes. Susan decided to distract me from my thoughts and, putting her arm around me, chatted until 2 in the morning, almost closing time. I stayed with her in her hotel room, and she was definitely driving that night. The following Monday, I returned to southern Oklahoma and spoke with Torre in the evening. I mentioned that I had seen Tracy in Charleston and learned that she had returned there for the same reason as me, to finalize the sale of her house on Daniel Island. She had been renting it out for the past year, and the tenants had decided they wanted to buy it. I also wanted to tell you that Jimmy and I are getting divorced. God, Tori, I didn't expect that. I really didn't. Me neither, she replied, and I could hear her crying softly. She gathered her strength and continued. He started an affair with a woman who works for one of our clients, and before we knew it, it turned into a full-blown affair and now she's pregnant with his baby. It's one big bloody mess. Life is shit, isn't it? She tried to laugh through her sobs, but she couldn't. We'll sort out the kids and the house. Hell, you know how it is. It's a bloody divorce. Torre, you know I'll be here for you if you need anything. How did Steve and Donna take it? I haven't told them yet. You're the only one I've told, but I will. It's going to break Dad's heart. He loves Jimmy. We talked a little more, and I decided to drive to Denton to spend the day with her and the kids and help out however I could. I wanted to call Jimmy and tell him what I thought, but what good would that do? Instead, I decided to help Tora in any way I could. The following Saturday, I brought a couple of boxes of pizza from Moe's Pizza and 12 cans of high-res beer to the kitchen of Tora Richardson, a lonely and beautiful mother. My parents have 2 children, Jimmy Jr. and Anne, aged 12 and 10, and over the past few years I have grown to love them like my own. They greeted me with joy, as always, and when I looked at her, I caught my breath. I kept thinking, how could this man be so stupid to leave such a beautiful woman? All 4 gallant sisters look alike. They all have blonde hair, blue eyes, and athletic builds. They were all born within 4 years of each other. Tora felt awkward standing there. She was wearing shorts, a top and sandals, and her hair was braided in a French braid. The top did its job, but barely. It was a strange feeling. When I saw Tracy a few nights ago, she reminded me of Tora. But now, as she stood in front of me, I didn't have a single thought or concern about Tracy. God, he's such a jerk, I said without thinking, and quickly apologized. A sly smile appeared on Tora's face. His loss, probably, she replied. The kids had already started eating, and we joined them. After dinner, they went to the pool and played with the neighbors' kids, while Tora and I relaxed on the patio. Let's have dinner tonight, Dave. I know just the place. She just asked me out on a date. How could I refuse? I couldn't, so I accepted. I want you to take me to Cattleman's, and then we'll go to Whiskey Girl. Ha! God, you've got the whole night planned out. Okay, Fort Worth it is. Both places were on Stockyard Road. I had been to Cattleman's before, but Whiskey Girl was new to me. Nevertheless, my obligatory Lucchese boots were in the car, already worn in from 2 outings. Being a Charleston resident, I didn't bother buying a hat. The kids stayed with a neighbor, and after we freshened up and changed, the 2 of us headed to Fort Worth. We started talking over dinner. When did he come to you? I asked. About 3 weeks ago. He just came at me, laid out everything he thought, and said he wanted a divorce. I cried for 2 weeks even when I was talking to you last Monday, but now I'm going to cry all the tears I've been holding back. This week we agreed on child support in the house. He took the rest of his things and can see the kids whenever he wants. I'll never hold anything against him. And he knows that. I saw it in her eyes. She had survived, and despite her beauty, she wouldn't be on the market for long. Some cowboy will try to get her as soon as she's available. So, are you still in that hot film that got you divorced? She asked. I couldn't help but laugh at that question. I told her the whole story, and she knew that Susan and I were seeing each other regularly. Whenever we get the chance, I replied. Yes, but is it serious? A more curious look appeared in her eyes. Funny, Susan and I hugged whenever we got the chance, went to restaurants when we could, and as far as I knew, we were faithful to each other. I knew I wasn't interested in chasing women in every city I visited, and I knew for a fact that Susan had rejected more athletes than she could count. But were we in a serious relationship? I didn't know. We enjoyed the rest of our dinner, and then she showed me the Whiskey Girl Saloon. My friends and I used to come here on Wednesdays, drink half-price cocktails, and stare at cowboy butts all night. She giggled, and when I jokingly raised an eyebrow, she added, "Oh, don't look at me like that. It was nothing more than that." I believed her. She wasn't the type to cheat on her husband. Several guys asked her to dance, and I didn't mind, of course, but she only danced swing with a couple of them. Nothing slow. She saved all the slow dances for me. Under different circumstances, I would have pursued her. It was perfectly clear that she was mine if I wanted her. And to be honest, I did want her, but I couldn't. I was involved with another woman. I was Uncle Dave to her children, and just as importantly, she was going through a divorce and was vulnerable to me. I know how she felt about me, and to be honest, I felt the same way about her. I could have loved that woman for the rest of my life if it weren't for the baggage we both brought into this life. Instead, we drove quietly to Denton, and she arranged for me to stay in the guest bedroom. 3 months earlier, I had started building my lakefront home and ordered an oak log home from Sevierville, Tennessee, which their crew delivered with utilities and finishing touches in less than 60 days. Last week, a local crew from Durant finished building the dock and launching the boats, and I watched my new 22-foot Sea Hunt BX boat go into the water at the local marina. Susan bought the house a couple of months ago, and I've been spending half my time there instead of in a hotel. Monroe has allowed me to stay with her temporarily until the house is ready, but as I've said, hotels are not my favorite place to stay even when I'm living on the company. Uncle Dave, it's time to go. The fish aren't going to sit here all day, my niece Anne called, as Jimmy Jr. and I made our way down to the dock. She was already wearing her life jacket and waiting at the stern. Tori had allowed me to have the kids for the weekend after they had been asking her for over a month. Add to that 2 kids and a lake, and they wanted their own rooms permanently. I didn't mind. They were great company, and after a while, my lake house became their permanent vacation spot. After 2 days of fishing, swimming, and burning through a tank and a half of gas on the jet skis, Tori arrived to pick up 2 slightly sunburned and exhausted children. After I convinced her to let them stay one more night and offered her the guest room, we settled on the porch and watched the sunset. "Tracy caught that bastard cheating again," she said, watching my reaction. "What, twice in 9 months of marriage?" A smug smile spread across my face. The first time after the wedding, Charlie Duguay had been caught with another girlfriend, Lucy, during a drunken party in Austin, and the girl's boyfriend didn't take it too kindly. He earned himself a nasty black eye. "True love," I added. Tori just playfully slapped my hand. This time, she came home unexpectedly and caught him in their bed. She packed her things and moved back in with her mom and dad. Neither of them are thrilled about it, I can tell you that. I'll have to remember to send flowers and condolences to Steve. I'm cruel, I know. They love her as much as all of you do. Tori looked at me strangely before speaking again. She told me she made a mistake soon after she came back from Vegas. It's helping her a lot now. I don't remember who told her mom or Claire, but one of them said she'd regret leaving you for that bastard until the day she died. I think she understands that now. I didn't answer and turned my attention back to the landscape. The sun finally sank below the horizon, and I watched Tori's face in the fading light. She was looking at the water, and the twilight emphasized her noble features before she turned back to me. We sat there talking about everything under the sun for several more hours before stopping for the night at Lake Texoma. After she freshened up and put on one of my t-shirts, we sat on the porch and enjoyed our morning coffee. "Dave, we probably need to talk about business." "What do you want to talk about, Susan?" "About us. About what you want, what I want. Do you want to get married, settle down, or are you happy with the way things are?" God, how the hell was I supposed to answer that question? I hadn't really thought about marriage, but if that's what she wanted, I would seriously consider it. And then it dawned on me. At least now it wouldn't be what I wanted, but what she might want, and in the long run, that would never work. "Susan, I'd be lying if I said I didn't like what we have right now, but to be honest, I'd probably agree if you wanted to take it further. I just don't see any reason why we should change what we have right now." "Okay," I muttered. But she read my mind and jumped out of her chair, sat down on my lap, and hugged me around the neck. "Okay, Romeo Hoff. I think we both feel the same way. I thought you would insist on marriage, and like you, I'm happy with what we have. But I want to talk about something else. I married Billy right after college when I was 21, and damn it, I'm almost 39. And I'm effeminate," I interrupted her. "Shut up, I'm not your mother. I mean, one of the contract workers on my floor recently asked me out, and I turned him down even though I really wanted to go, and that's the thing. I felt like a wife, and I've only been married for 16 years, and the last 4 years have been practically miserable." Susan, baby, listen to me for a minute. I knew where this conversation was going, and I needed to calm her down. We enjoy each other's company. You're a great companion. We fit together like gloves, and God knows you're the best lover I've ever had, but I'm not your husband. You're not a married woman, and if you want to go out and have a great time, you're a free woman who can do just that. We've hardly spoken since the divorce, with a few exceptions, and not once since we moved here. I'm not going to sit around sulking if you go out and have fun. You know, I've seen Tori a couple of times and tried not to get involved with her. God, I tried so hard. She playfully patted me on the shoulder as she said the last sentence, but only playfully. Tori's a little different. You know what baggage she's carrying? I don't need to explain. If I had done that with Tori, we would have become an exclusive, serious couple. And we both knew it, so it didn't happen. Dave, stop it. We understand each other. I want what we have to continue as long as it's good for us. If I sleep with someone else, it will only be sex. I will only make love to you, okay? I hugged her for a few moments, then picked her up and carried her to the dock. You wouldn't dare, Dave Hoff. I dared and followed her into the water at the end of the dock. That should cool your dirty mind a little. I laughed. Susan ended up going on a few dates with the technician, and I have to admit that the second time she spent the weekend with him in San Antonio. I paced around the room a bit, at least until Tori pulled me out of my imaginary pit of despair and we replayed Stockyards. One evening, I was sitting in a chair at the marina sipping a new bottle of wine when my peace was interrupted by a phone call. Dave, is now a good time? Can we talk? I didn't want to, I really didn't, but something inside me told me it would be good for me. Tracy, I think now is a good time. Can we talk on the phone? No, that's why I parked at the entrance. This caught me off guard, so I invited her in and met her on the porch, offering her a glass of wine before we sat down at the table. I couldn't deny that she looked good, as always, gorgeous. Her hair was significantly longer. Well, we both look good, I said, looking slightly drunk. She raised an eyebrow, and I noticed a faint smile appear on her lips. Maybe it was the alcohol, but for a moment I thought that if she grabbed me, I would go into full defense mode and deliberately weaken myself. Our divorce was as amicable as the experience of an adulterous whore, a stud, a cheater, a cuckold, not to mention my own feelings of guilt could be. However, on the surface, we smiled, even hugged, and parted ways. The guilt made me blurt out bitch, without addressing anyone in particular. Tori keeps me updated on how you're doing, Dave. She knows I'm a fool, but who doesn't these days? Mom and Dad asked me to say hi. They're good people, Tracy. Yes, they take care of me when no one else will. I'm grateful to them. Today, I needed to sit down and talk to someone I love. And I know it's been over between us for a long time, but you're the only person I know who can tell me the truth. Considering how things turned out, I don't know how well I did. She turned away, trying not to look at me. It's funny that you're practically living behind me after I moved here after my self-destruction. I think you know that Mr. Perfect lasted long enough to demand a divorce, not an annulment. What an idiot I am. I knew she wanted to cry, but I didn't need to. I'd already cried twice in the rain and wasn't about to do it again. Tracy, it's all in the past. You'll be who you think you are when you realize it. Old Monroe truth. I grinned. Good old Monroe. You know, I always loved that old lecher. Did you know he pinched my bum once at the New Year's Eve party you guys threw at the alley? She laughed, began to relax, and after a pause continued. Dave, let's be friends. I don't have any friends left and I'm lonely. The next morning, I woke up alone in bed, the alcohol fog clearing, and the thoughts spinning in my head that I had apparently entertained my ex-wife. I had been very drunk and that was my excuse. I blamed it all on the wine, but I knew it was for the best. When I got out of the shower and got dressed, I found her letter on the table. My dear Dave, I didn't want you to wake up and see me crying. I'll do that on the road, alone. Last night was the best night of my life, except for my wedding night, and at the same time, it was the worst. The worst because I've decided to leave Texas and move to the West Coast. I told my mom and dad yesterday, and although they were sad, they understood. Earlier this week, I quit my job and got a new one in San Jose. I won't be traveling as much as I used to, so it looks like I'll be settling down. Dave, I've made so many mistakes I don't even know where to start. First of all, I'm sorry I didn't talk to you after that trip to Memphis. God knows I know what you're like when you drink Cuervo. And I believe none of this would have happened if I were the strong woman you married. The next big problem, besides the fact that I never dated that loser, was that I expected you to fight for me. I know you put the decision on me, but when you walked away and let me hang there, I should have rushed home and begged you to take me back. Yes, I mean home. Because with you, my home will always be my home. Everything else will just be a place where I spend the night. I know you've seen Tori a few times, and while I don't know how things will turn out, please do right by her. She loves you, I know, but she's also afraid because you're her family, and it's hard for her to accept that. I will always love you, my dear. Always. And although I know I have destroyed everything we had, I can only hope that you find the peace and love that I know you need. I wish it could be me, but I'm afraid that will never happen. You deserve better, much better. If you're ever in San Jose, please find me. I'll buy it for you. Your forever loving wife, Tracy. I sat at the table for a few minutes, sipping my coffee and rereading the letter. There were a few things I wanted to say to her that morning that needed to be said. I forgave her for what she had done, and I hoped she would forgive me for my sins. Perhaps I had vented all my anger the night before, but this morning I felt only sadness for what we had lost. Several years passed after the events at Freewheels, and life went on as it had, in its own way. I took the letter and put it with the other things from our marriage in a drawer in the chest of drawers, next to the wedding ring she had returned to me on the kitchen table on that last day we were a couple. Susan returned to Charleston for a few weeks to work on another project Monroe needed help with, and I tried to immerse myself in various projects at the factory, but I felt distracted. At the end of one particularly stressful day, our secretary Rose invited me to join her, her husband, and a few other people at the Choctaw restaurant. I arrived at the appointed time and found myself at a table with Rose, Walter, her husband, and two other women, Sarah, whose last name I forgot, and an interesting 30-year-old divorcee named Venona Gustafson. It was the latter who piqued my curiosity. She had worked in a casino until she went back to school, and now she was a radiologist assistant at a hospital in Sherman. We had a great dinner, and when it was over, I offered to buy everyone a drink at the bar, and because it was late, Venona was the only one who could stay. To describe her, you need a little imagination. She has a short pixie cut, which she dyes in various shades of dark purple mixed with her natural black hair color. Both her arms are covered in intricate black and gray tattoos up to her wrists, and she says she has several tattoos of roses and vines encircling her chest and running down her torso. Many years ago, Winona was a biker and married a strong Swedish man from whom she took her surname, but they separated due to certain needs she developed while he was on a long business trip to Oklahoma, working for an oil company. According to her, she was a nymphomaniac, and to satisfy this need, she married several men while her husband was away on business abroad. During his last trip, he returned home and discovered that she had married a retired Marine who broke up with her after learning the truth as a result of a confrontation with a big guy. She fell deeply in love with the Marine and then decided to leave her husband and start a new life by going back to school. That was her life before she worked at the casino. And since then, she has devoted herself to getting her degree and trying to find a place in what she calls the normal world. We exchanged stories late into the night until she finally had to leave and move south. I persuaded her to give me her phone number and gave her my business card. For the first time in a long time, I found myself humming to myself as I drove home. That humming requires some explanation. Susan had found a man with whom she thought she was in a serious relationship. As she put it, it was very similar to my experience with Tracy. She fell in love at first sight, and they had been a couple ever since. We didn't have sex on the side, and I probably wouldn't have done so even if she had offered. She was clearly in love with this guy, and her place was in his bed, not mine. It turned out to be a very good decision. Our friendship grew even stronger. She hasn't told him about our relationship and probably won't because it would only raise suspicions about our friendship. But I can talk to him myself, with Susan's blessing. I really like this guy, and I have a job that I think he would be great at. Rose knew this, which is why I think she invited me to join her that evening, even though she thought I would be more interested in a woman with more traditional views. The salesman knew I was close to a decision. I had been looking at the tinted fat boy for over 30 minutes, and the only thing left to decide was how many extras to get. I definitely wanted a soft passenger seat with a small backrest. Perhaps I was going through an early midlife crisis, but the Harley Fat Boy status symbol had been appealing to me for quite some time. It didn't take much effort on the salesman's part, and we closed the deal that same day. Unfortunately, due to a lack of orders, I had to wait almost 60 days for delivery. When it arrived, I took it for its first ride south. I was sitting on it in the car park outside Texoma Medical Center when Winona came out after her shift. When she saw it, she even squealed. An interesting sound. She changed into a short skirt and a halter top and put on blue-tinted glasses before getting on the bike. I pointed south, and within a minute we were on our way to Denton to meet Torre and join her and her friend for the night in Fort Worth. Sometimes I feel like I'm in honeymoon training school. Susan was my lover before she found her perfect man, and Tori was kidnapped, just as I promised, although I had a chance but didn't take it. But none of that mattered. The little minx was riding behind me. When we pulled up to Tori's house, her bag with her things for the night was in the back seat, along with her dancing shoes. Tori greeted us, and we met Dan, her new boyfriend, and another couple who joined us for the evening. The evening went great. We had dinner at Cattleman's, then went to a place I'd never been to but had always heard about, Billy Bob's. We danced until we dropped, and at one point I switched partners with Dan and took Tori out onto the dance floor. Is this the guy you want to spend the rest of your life with? Damn, I don't know yet, Dave. He's a lot of fun. He loves my kids, he has two of his own, and he treats me like a princess. Well, he's lucky. You're the most beautiful girl in Texas, and he'd be a fool to let you get away like I did. She looked at me with a strange expression on her face, then just pressed her cheek against my shirt as we danced a slow waltz. I glanced over at Dan and Winona, and it was clear that he was enjoying the dance. The sight of a tall cowboy dancing with a tattooed biker chick was pretty funny. Where are you staying tonight, Dave? I booked a room not far from here. Why don't you cancel your reservation and stay with me? Winona and you can stay in the guest room by the pool. When the evening was over, that's what I did. Another couple stayed with us, and one of them pulled out a bottle. I thought back to that night in Memphis for a moment, but with Winona by my side and no guilt, I went along with it. We all slept until noon, and when I woke up, the ladies were in the kitchen, and the only men left were Dan and me. Torre had left early after talking to Torre. I didn't insist. Winona and I stayed after the other couple left, and I sipped beer on the patio, watching two very beautiful women swim naked in the pool and then lie down on lounge chairs and sunbathe. It was a good day for a man. That night in Denton changed the dynamic of our relationship, mostly for the better, in some cases for the worse. Dan was disappointed when Tori ended their relationship, and I couldn't blame him. She was the catch of his life, but she didn't love him and wasn't going to cheat on him. He was looking for a wife, and she wasn't it. Winona and I saw each other a couple of times a week, and it was always intense. That Marine had to endure it. She deserved it. Another trait Winona had was her amazing understanding of human relationships. She knew that Torre and I had a close relationship, and it didn't bother her in the least. One evening, sitting on the porch, she explained it this way. Dave, I've had a lot of men over the years, many more when I was younger and more liberated. But there aren't many left now. I really like you. If you weren't in love with Tori, I'd destroy any bitch who came near you because you're so good. But I know there are other great guys out there. I've had my fill of them. Men have fallen in love with me, and I've loved other men. I just haven't met someone who loves me as much as I love him. When that happens, I'll be with him and no one else. Tori is going out more and more and, like me, enjoying life, but she's waiting for you to make the first move. When you do, she won't even look at another man. You'll be hers, and she'll be yours. You know what I'm saying, you stubborn bull? That night, I made love to Winona for the last time, and we remembered it for the rest of our lives. The next morning, I rode my Harley to Denton, stopped at a shop to buy a dozen roses, and walked up to Tori's door. When she opened the door, I knew it was time. The children had gone to their fathers, and we sat together on the patio. Tori, I can't guarantee that everything will be perfect and work out the way we expect, but I want us to try to build a relationship. An exclusive relationship? I don't want to be with another woman, and that includes Winona, and you know what I'm giving up. We both laughed. Thus began Gallant's next great romance. It took me several years to think through my love for this woman before I was ready to make a commitment. The next day, I visited Steve and Donna's house and asked their permission to see Tori on a serious level. I felt a special gratitude to Steve. I had already taken one of his daughters and was now working on the second. I had no doubt about his feelings, but he made me feel like a man when he proudly gave me his blessing. I had one more trip to make, and it wasn't going to be easy. The late-night flight to San Francisco on Friday went smoothly, and the drive to Santa Clara, where Tracy had bought an apartment, was marred only by my own anxiety. She knew I was coming because I didn't want to interrupt her meeting or cause any awkwardness. She was an unmarried woman living her life, and I understood perfectly well what that meant. I parked in the guest area and headed over to her with a bottle of wine as a gift. I knocked hesitantly on the door, but there was a quick response. She immediately hugged me and kissed me on the cheek, and when she pulled away, I saw tears in her eyes. Tori called me earlier. We talked for a long time, and I think we both cried out everything we needed to cry out for a couple of lifetimes. Dave, she's the perfect woman for you, and she's so in love that she can't live without you. I know you wanted to talk to me about this in person, and I appreciate that, but honestly, I don't mind. So instead of crying, let me grab my bag and we'll go out to dinner. I know a great place you'll love, and you can tell me about the kids. That's how the whole visit went. She was completely supportive, and we became the friends she wanted us to be. I learned that she was dating someone, though nothing serious, and that she had already been promoted twice at her new job. Tracy hadn't been back to Texas since she moved to California, but Steve and Donna had visited a couple of times, and Claire and her husband had flown in for grape picking and tours of Sonoma County. When I flew home, there were a few tears, but that was to be expected. We simply wished each other well, hugged, and I boarded the Boeing 767 with a clear conscience, ready to make another noblewoman my wife. Epilogue. Tori Gallant Richardson and David William Hoff were married in early July on the morning of our Texas log home on the shores of Lake Texoma. Jimmy Jr. was my best man and witness, and Anne was the maid of honor. Steve gave her away, and all of her sisters, including Tracy and Lucy, were present at the ceremony. Tracy was accompanied by her current boyfriend, an investment broker from San Francisco. Lucy came alone and kept to herself throughout the event. I thought she was still acting vulgar, but I put up with it for Tori and her family. On my side, my mother flew in for the event accompanied by Monroe. It was unexpected, but they looked like a happy couple. My father died a few years ago, and she was tired of being alone. Susan and Winona came to the event with their current partners. Susan and her true love didn't work out. He was too clingy, and she felt restricted, so she broke up with him. Dave, I shouldn't have had that conversation with you this morning. Damn, I had a chance. She winked, but she was serious. Nevertheless, she met Tori and Winona, and we all got together from time to time on Saturday nights in DFW, although we no longer hung out in Torrey. Now I was seeing only one woman, and the rings on our fingers remained. Winona hadn't found her one, but she kept trying, and I was damn sure that whoever he was, he would enjoy life to the fullest. She and Torrey developed a particularly strong friendship, so we see each other often. The kids think she's cool. As soon as the ceremony was over, a quick morning rain fell, and instead of tears, there was only laughter. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for new videos.